Welcome to Mystifying Miracles. My name is Kristen, and I go over stories twice a week, and they're always true, mysterious stories, and they have at least one miracle, usually more than that. So if it sounds cool, listen in and we'll begin. Our story today takes place in Wisconsin, and a woman by the name of Mary Mueller, she was a volunteer firefighter. And this particular event happened on January 20th, 1992. And the exact city was Larson. So Larson, Wisconsin. In addition to Mary being a volunteer firefighter, she also worked a swing shift at a factory, and she ran a 131-acre farm. So she was pretty busy. The place where she volunteered as a firefighter was Clayton Winchester Township Fire Department. And on this particular day in 1992, Mary was kind of sluggish, and she was just thinking, oh man, I hope I get to stay in and not do anything today, if just my pager won't go off. She happened to be washing her hair when the pager actually went off. And about 2 miles away, there was a car apparently on fire. And Mary had been listening, and the dispatcher had said, or asked, I guess over the intercom or whatever you call it, the dispatcher had asked for the jaws of life. So Mary knew right away, oh gosh, this is serious then. So Mary got in a rush. She went ahead, dried off, jumped in her clothes, into her truck, headed straight to the accident. And she was so fast, and since she was close, she was only 2 miles away, she was also the first on the scene. When Mary got there, she looked around and she was like, okay, the car's not on fire. However, it did look like an explosion had gone off. There was so much mess, but she didn't see a fire anywhere. She just saw like this big hunk of twisted metal on the side of the highway there, kind of on the highway as well. And no one knew what had happened at that time, but what happened was a semi-trailer had gone through and hit this car. And it said the semi-trailer had been pulling a front-end loader with metal tracks on a flatbed. That's a mouthful. Anyway, though, when it passed, I guess, this car, it ripped off the roof. It said like a can opener. And I guess the way it was done or how it happened, the guy driving the semi-trailer had no idea. He didn't even know what had happened. So he kept driving, not realizing what he hit and what had happened. And the vehicle he hit was carrying 3 University of Wisconsin students. And they had tried to swerve and miss this guy. But, unfortunately, the steel treads were sticking out. And I guess that part just kind of peeled off the roof of the student's car. And Mary saw right away that under the left bumper, it happened to be a station wagon, and she saw a deceased young man. She continued surveying the area. She also saw a young lady trapped inside the wreckage itself. And actually, another volunteer had showed up as well right after Mary, and she was already consoling the girl, saying, we're getting help, paramedics are coming as fast as they can. So Mary continues to look. She goes around to the passenger side of the car, of the twisted metal heap, and in a ditch, not too far off, she thinks she sees another person. So Mary slid down into the ditch to see if that was indeed a person, and it was. There was a 21-year-old girl down there. She had blonde hair, and Mary just looked at her like terrified, like, oh my gosh. So Mary just tried to get her head together. She introduced herself to the girl, and the girl's name happened to be Lori. She said, I'm Mary. I'm going to try to help you. She first noticed that Lori had a bruised calf, and she continued looking, for all her injuries. And she just saw like a small little trickle of blood, and that's all Mary could see on Lori. So she continues looking around, and what had happened is the girl had a bunch of heavy clothing because it was a cold day, to Wisconsin. So she was bundled up, and her hair was actually matted on top of another injury. So, first off, all Mary saw was the bruised calf, when indeed, after she noticed the trickle of blood and followed it, Mary saw a 6 by 3 inch gash up under all the clothing. And in fact, Lori happened to be bleeding to death. Mary just couldn't see it at the first start of things because, again, the heavy clothing in the girl's hair. Now, since Mary had just hopped in her own personal truck and just flew there, she didn't have any supplies like what was normally on the fire truck. So she was just looking around like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to use to help stop this bleeding? You can tell Lori's lying there and she's, bleeding out. Mary didn't know what to do. All these thoughts going through her head, and she's looking around. And she immediately closes her eyes really quick, says a quick little prayer, says, God, I can't do this alone. What am I going to do to help this young girl? Immediately after that quick little prayer, she keeps scanning this area. What can I use? What can I use? Mary's looking around and all she sees is snow. And she's like, gosh, there's nothing. What am I going to do? And she keeps looking, and all of a sudden, she notices a dark red bag, and it had handles just sitting in the snow a little ways off. And she could tell, she said it had a medical emblem, the little emblem on it. So she knew right away, that's a medical bag. That's weird. So she flies over there, grabs it. Inside were all these supplies. And she was like, yes, she grabs the gauze, the bandages. She immediately goes to work and trying to stop the bleeding from this gash on Lori. And, as she's doing this, working on Lori, applying pressure and everything, Lori, was scared. She probably can tell that she doesn't have much time left. And she asks Mary, she goes, please don't leave me alone. Please come to the hospital with me. Well, Mary, that wasn't the custom for firefighters, volunteer or not, to do that. At this point, she just felt so bad for Lori, and so she couldn't leave her alone. Mary, at that point, began to hear the Care Flight helicopter coming. Once it lands and everything, and people are starting to try to load Lori onto the helicopter, it's then realized that this girl doesn't have time to be loaded onto a helicopter and even flown. This is not going to work. And the weather, it's chilly, and I don't know how long it would have taken. You would have thought that would be faster than an ambulance, but an ambulance had also come on the scene, and the paramedics even said too, she's not going to make it. We've got to take her this way, because somebody had to be able to hold pressure enough, deep pressure, because Lori had lost a lot of blood at this point. So the paramedics asked Mary to come along and help them, or Lori's not going to make it. What they ended up doing, they taped Mary's hands, both of them, against the wound and then to the backboard that Lori was laying on. So they, take Mary's hands, however they positioned enough to give pressure, and they taped them, because if she was to let up accidentally 1, inch on accident, that's how dire the situation was for Lori. So they thought of this quickly. Mary said, yes, absolutely. They taped her, loaded. It took several men actually to load both women, because they're now at this point taped together, onto the ambulance and off to the hospital. And once they got there and Lori was stabilized, she made it to the hospital, and Mary heads back to the scene of the accident. And, it had been monitored heavily because everything was there. They had to, investigations, all that. So she goes back. She's searching for the bag and she can't find it anywhere. And she asked many of the firefighters and the other personnel on the scene if anyone had seen it or picked it up. No one had. No one had seen any kind of bag like that, or taken it anywhere or done anything with it because they couldn't, take items away from the scene anyways because it was an open investigation at this point. So Mary was just like, that is the oddest thing. Mary even looked for discarded gauze or bandages that she had pulled out and used to stop the bleeding on Lori. Because, you'd think there'd be some thrown about or no, nothing, not one gauze, not one bit of blood on any of the stuff that she used or the supplies themselves, the bag, nothing. She was just like, that had to have been God. To this day, you got to remember this was in 1992. Mary still never found out where that bag went, what happened to it, how did it get in the snow. All she can attribute it to is God helping her out in that moment so that Lori wouldn't pass. And wouldn't you know it, to this day, Lori and Mary are still great friends. They just had that bond, Both know and will tell people, they knew that God, his divine hands, helped them out that day, and there is just no other explanation. So very, very cool, mysterious indeed, but great ending as usual. And of course, Lori did make it. Again, they were friends, still are to this day, and just cool. I hope you guys liked this one, and let me know what you think. I love to read comments, so let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know that too. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you guys for the next one. Thank you so much for watching.